Hamburger here, and I'm at the AUTRY Museum visiting the Masters of the American West. So let me show you a little bit of the paintings this year and recommend that if you're interested in painting or in buying Western art, that you take a look at this show before it closes. It's Tom Berger. We're at the 25th Masters of the American West at the AUTRY Museum in Griffith Park, Los Angeles. Easy to get to from north or south on the 101, 134, and it's right here just before Glendale. I strongly recommend that you come and see this show. This is the art of Joanne Peralta. She was the jurist in one of the early slowpokes, and her art is really beautiful, well thought out, and well executed. Terry Kelly Moyers and her husband John Moyers are both in the show, and they are both exceptional artists. And what you might find interesting here is the fact that her art, and sometimes in his, they feel no need to put in a background or a landscape. It's just the subject matter of the art itself, and it's beautiful. And let me just kind of give you an overview of both the presentation and the type of art at this wonderful show. In my personal opinion, this is one of the most high-quality Western art shows there is. Tori did this remarkable little wall sculpture called Horse Feathers. It's really very well executed, has a lot of interest and a lot of dimension to it. She is the former president of the California Art Club and had been in that role from I think about 1991 until early this year when Michael Obermeyer took over. But Peter is a remarkable artist both in landscapes and seascapes and ecclesiastical art. This is called Reclining Nude. It is a fanciful piece done by Nick Dollinger, who's a sculptor from actually Australia, but he lives in Texas now. And he also gave a talk here this year on how he became a fine art sculptor. And extremely interesting. That's a subject for a different discussion. This is probably the only nude that you will ever see in the Masters of the American West. It's the silly squirrel in the classical pose. And he is an artist from Santa Barbara, and he does just absolutely remarkable work. And so just for a local artist painting high-end Western art, I thought we'd be interested. The work of Dennis Milholm. Dennis and I have known each other ever since I became associated with the AUTRY show. It's about 2010, 2011. And he paints photographically, realistically in oil. And he tends to paint scenes that I tend to photograph when we're out in the same territory. And we've had a lot of discussions about what communicates, the landscape better, the photorealistic painting or the photograph. And I have to reluctantly agree as a photographer, I guess, that the painting communicates the energy of the view better than the photograph does. His work is absolutely gorgeous. Tony Aveda. I'll take a little bit of credit for him being in the AUTRY show now. I got to know Tony by going to the LA Art Show. He was part of the exhibitions put on by the Blue Rain Gallery, and I really liked his art. It was contemporary, it was modern, it was not quite abstract, it's expressionistic. He's a Native American artist, and I mentioned him several times to the head of the museum here, Rick West, over the years, and lo and behold, 2 years ago he was in the show, and the second year he won the Purchase Award in the show. So Tony Aveda's work is something that you ought to follow. Love all art, but this art is by Native American artist Kevin Redstar, and we had little pieces of his art in our Seaside Gallery when we owned it. But he just does beautiful work. It's spectacular in colors. The compositions, the subject matter, just gains and holds your interest. The work of a friend, Kim Wiggins, that again I got to know through the AUTRY. Again, his work is very expressionistic. It's very southwestern as opposed to classical cowboy and Indian type western. But the way he uses color and subject matter to draw your eye into his imagery is just fascinating to me. I'm lucky enough to own a small Kim Wiggins and would love to have more. Maxwell Hajiz. He kind of came to fame here about 5 or 6 years ago in the AUTRY. His art, as you can see, is highly stylized. It's of Native Americans usually. It's very, very popular. And the interesting story about Mr. Hajiz is that he tells the story of coming through the AUTRY Museum and looking at the art as an elementary school student many times because he grew up in the LA area, never once imagining that he would ever, one, be an artist, or two, be a featured artist in the AUTRY Masters of the American West. So beautiful art, wonderful story. This is a painting by Thomas Blackshear. Thomas was our jurist at the Slowpoke 2 years ago, 2019, as I recall. And besides being a wonderful gentleman to know, he's a great painter and very interesting in the subject matter he picks and how he depicts it. So, painting by Mateo Romero. I think this is the 3rd year that he's been in the AUTRY Museum. 2 years ago, we bought one of his paintings, and this year we were lucky enough to buy the one that I'm showing here. Although he has, about 4 of them on display here. Mateo's interesting artist. He's Native American, and his wife is an artist. I believe she's a weaver. His daughter is an artist. She does Pueblo pottery. And the interesting thing about him, besides, being one of the very many talented Native American artists, is he's an Ivy League artist. He got his fine arts education at Dartmouth. So in the art world overall, you don't find too many Ivy Leaguers, and in the Western art world, they're very rare. So it's kind of fun to see that. Classic Ed Mell. This is the 2nd year that he's been in the AUTRY Museum. He was well known in the commercial art markets. He paints basically almost abstract, but expressionistic abstract landscapes of the Southwest, and the angles and use of light that you see in this image here, as well as this one, are classic in his work. And again, when you're looking at painters who are painting the 20th or 21st century West, you have to put Ed Mell right up there in the top 5. Is another artist I've followed for a number of years. I think this is his first time in the AUTRY Masters of the American West. This is a big painting. It's 50 inches by 80 inches. It's typical of his glowing teepee style. And the images that he paints on the skins of the teepee are as significant as the overall image itself. This year, this is the highest priced painting in the show. It's $375,000. But you can't buy it because it sold last night. Really like this painting of Brett Allen Johnson. It's the colors, and when I talk to you about painting modern pictures of the West, even an abstract, it doesn't have to be realistic as this one is. It uses the colors you're looking at here. It's going to define Western art. This painting by Eric Bowman has a very special meaning for me because of the composition and the subject matter. It is highly reminiscent of a composite photograph piece of art that I put together about 4 years ago. I'll show you that at a later time, but the Native American silhouetted against a bright mesa with billowing clouds behind it really catches my attention. The Dean Mitchell watercolor, it's very typical of the watercolors that have been in the Masters of the American West for years. He tends to paint these sort of abandoned farm buildings on gray days, and yet the detail and the color renditions and the tonal differences between warm and cool are amazing. And this one won the Trustees Purchase Award this year for the museum, so this will be part of the permanent collection of the AUTRY Museum. Familiar with Joshua LaRock as an artist, but these 2 paintings, this one of the cowboy by a fire with his white horse, and this one of the woman on a horse with the Grand Canyon in the background. These are beautiful paintings, and as close as you get to them, you can almost not see the brush strokes anywhere. They are almost photographically, realistically depicted in oil, and they're absolutely gorgeous paintings, and there's a red dot on this one, so it's sold. This is a Bill Niebecker sculpture, and again, he's been a consistent exhibitor here at the Masters of the American West for a number of years. And if you look at Western Art Collector, March edition 2022, that's where we are, you'll find a multiple page article about him that's just fascinating. He's one of the best sculptors living and working in the Western art genre today. A John Fawcett oil painting, and he does Native Americans, mostly of the East Coast, but he always has a narrative in his paintings, and here these people are going over sketches in a sketchbook that probably is being done on a counting sheet. So, interesting story, very realistic in the painting technique, and very well done. It's hard to get much better than this in painting, classical Western art. With Michael Coleman, and I love his art because it's narrative, Western landscapes. Here in the image that you see here, it's called On the Edge. The hunter and his dog have actually shot an animal, but unfortunately the animal went over the edge of the cliff, and now the hunter has the problem of making sure his dogs don't go over the cliff and getting himself and the dogs back up to safety. But look at the treatment of light on the landscape in the background. The sun shining down the side of the cliff, the shadow of the branch here, the sunlight coming through the clouds and illuminating the cliffs in the background, a little bit of blue sky poking through the clearing clouds. Just a wonderful painting overall. And for all of you who might be painting Western, this is certainly not something to copy, but something to be inspired by. Justin Van Wetchel is one of the great great wildlife artists in the Western art world, as is Daniel Smith, which I'll show you in a minute. But the detail he gets here, the realism, the behavior of the animals, it's just hard to say enough good things about this. Also does a wonderful job on wildlife. This polar bear is absolutely beautiful. You can get as close as you want and look at the detail on this. You'd swear that that's a photograph, but it's not. It's an oil painting. Over here on his mountain lion or cougar, again, the posture of the animal, he's looking right at you out of the frame, and every whisker and every blade of hair is here. Just phenomenal work. Glenn Shamil was honored yesterday as probably being the artist who's received the most awards over the years here at the AUTRY of the American West, and this one was selected as the John Garrity Award, and will become part of the permanent exhibition of the AUTRY. It's an absolutely beautiful piece, as is the one next to it, which I like just as much. I just love the way here on no current events, he's caught the light on the snow and the contrast of the warm tones versus the cool tones, the ice on the river. I tend to like snow paintings, not everybody does, but to me this is also just an absolutely gorgeous painting. And this is Jim Wilcox's landscapes here. There's three of them here. This one of the three just continually catches my eye, and I'm quite sure the reason is that the foreground is dark, the midground is bright, so your eye is led by those tones directly into the painting, and then you've got the stream flowing in to the painting itself, dragging your eye in, and it brings you right into that meadow with the aspen trees turning in early fall. What an absolutely beautiful painting. This is 24 by 24 inches. It's called Best of Fall, and it certainly is. Well, Holson is another young Western artist that I've gotten to know. The detail and the craftsmanship that he puts into his paintings is absolutely second to none. This artist is going to be around and popular for many, many years. Let me just take you in a little bit and show you the detail that he's able to get here. This is a painting. It looks like I'm photographing, carved leather. The spotlights that are shining off of this is because he's glazed this the way artists glazed paints back in the 17th and 18th century. And it adds, it just adds depth to the painting. So again, a different technique, a still life, very, very Western. Whitney Weisling is probably the youngest artist in the Masters of the American West. We've known her and her family for quite a few years, and we're lucky enough to have an early Whitney Weisling painting of her own. I'm going to guess she's 21 or 22 years old now, and she's been in this show since she was 18 or 19, and she just does phenomenal work, as does her mother, Joanne Peralta, and her father, Morgan Weisling. So she's got great teachers surrounding her, but again, here's another young Western artist to watch. Through all of these, but I wanted to point out that at the Masters of the American West, it's not all just big paintings at big prices. They have a miniature wall, and this is very popular. So here the paintings range maybe from $1,000 to about $6,000, depending on the reputation and quality of the artist and what they think they can get for their painting. So almost every artist who has big paintings in the main show provides a small painting here in the miniature section. These are very popular. These are the first to be auctioned off. Some of my favorites here. This is a Jim Wilcox. This is, Beaver Trail. I've walked that trail out in Jackson Hole, and it's absolutely beautiful. Here's another Kim Wiggins, and we talked about him earlier. I just like the way he paints. That's just my personal preference. Billy Schneck, with his posterized, very modern types of paintings. Dan Pinkham, again, his use of color is just phenomenal. Here's another Dean Mitchell watercolor. A Dennis Milholm. I've got a photograph that looks just like this, but Dennis's little painting here got more energy than I could get into the photo. Ed Mell again with his angular landscapes. John Fawcett again with his narrative of Native Americans in the water. John Budishin, who served as jurist for one of our slowpokes 5 years or 6 years ago, does these beautiful little landscapes of the local area. He always is in this show. He's never got a big painting in the show because he doesn't paint big. This is his preferred style and preferred size painting. And I've been in his studio, and he's got hundreds of these. He even does studies that are smaller before he does one this size. So this one's an 8 by 10. Thomas Blackshear, absolutely gorgeous. I love the fact that this Native American is staring right at you, eyeball to eyeball. Peter Adams with a beautiful Pacific Coast sunset. Bill Anton, again, with his gorgeous touch. And then Bill H.F. We haven't talked much about Bill, but here's another phenomenal artist. He's renowned for painting still lifes that are so three-dimensional on a two-dimension canvas that you feel you could reach out and kind of reach behind them.